Oh, that this too sullied flesh would melt, thaw, and resolve itself into a dew, or that the everlasting had not fixed his cannon against self-slaughter! O God, how weary, stale, flat, and unprofitable seem to me all the uses of this world! Fie on it, ah fie! 'Tis an unweeded garden that grows to seed. Things rank and gross in nature possess it merely, that it should come to this. But 2 months dead, nay, not so much, not two, so excellent a king that was to this Hyperion to a satyr, so loving to my mother that he might not beteem the winds of heaven visit her face too roughly. Heaven and earth, must I remember? Why, she would hang on him as if increase of appetite had grown by what it fed on. And yet, within a month, let me not think on it. Frailty, thy name is woman! A little month or ere those shoes were old with which she followed my poor father's bot.
This excerpt presents Hamlet's first significant soliloquy of the play. In this passage, Hamlet is both describing what he is witnessing, as well as releasing some of his profound emotions. As the passage begins, Hamlet opens the soliloquy by contemplating suicide, but quickly dismissing the idea, as it is looked upon as unholy. He then proceeds to laud his father's excellence as a king, while at the same time blasting his mother for marrying so quickly to his uncle Claudius. In doing so, Hamlet proclaims that their relationship is to a degree incestuous. Throughout the whole excerpt, the reader can somewhat realize that Hamlet is in a state of melancholy, since he is deeply mourning from his father's death. This significant passage occurs after Hamlet's arrival from Wittenberg, which is the place where he was studying, and also after Hamlet's overt disrespectfulness to both his uncle and his mother for forgetting the tragedy of his father's death so quickly. In addition, this passage is placed before the part where Horatio explains to Hamlet that a ghost that resembles Hamlet's father has been lurking around the Danish castle. There are a couple of quotes containing literary techniques in this passage. The first one is a mix between allusion and hyperbole, where Hamlet says, "So excellent a king that was to this Hyperion to a satyr." Here there is a bit of hyperbole, since Hamlet is exaggerating his father's qualities as a king when he calls him a Hyperion. There is also allusion in this quote because by mentioning Hyperion and satyr, Hamlet is implicitly referring these two Greek legends to his father and his uncle, his father being the Hyperion and his uncle being the satyr. By referring to this, Hamlet is reiterating that his father possessed better qualities to be an excellent king than his uncle Claudius. This passage also contains two valuable metaphors. The first one is "Oh, that this too sullied flesh would melt, thaw, and resolve itself into a dew." This is a metaphor since he is comparing his melting flesh to dewdrops formed on plants. Basically, here is where Hamlet begins to contemplate suicide since he is in a state of such grief. Another metaphor found in this passage is when Hamlet says, "'Tis an unweeded garden that grows to seed." Here Hamlet is referring to the monarchies in the world, in which he explains that men are left to run the kingdom in their own ways without any sort of political guidance or laws, and from this they create new similar ill-fated heirs that become substantially worse than their predecessors. By using this quote, Hamlet also portrays his indignation with Claudius, where he believes that Claudius is unfit for the position of king of Denmark. This excerpt also contains an example of apostrophe present in the line where Hamlet says, "Frailty, thy name is woman." This is an example of apostrophe since it depicts Hamlet addressing an imaginary person, since the woman Frailty does not exist in the play. By saying this, Hamlet is conveying his disapproval of his mother's relationship with his uncle, and that it reeks of ludicrous incest. I believe the key motif represented in this passage is corruption. This is because throughout this portion of his soliloquy, Hamlet discusses valuable references that relate to his state of being corrupted. The first clue that made me relate this passage to corruption was his ramble about suicide. As seen in the line, his canon against self-slaughter, suicide was frowned upon by the church, and so after contemplating the idea, Hamlet quickly dismisses it since it is unrighteous and hence a form of corruption. Another hint of this motif is the use of "'tis an unweeded garden." In this line he is referring to the world as an unweeded garden, signifying that the world has no laws and that people are left to do deeds for the community in their own ways. By saying this, Hamlet is portraying the world as a corrupted place that lacks order and sanity. His speech is also saturated with words such as gross and rank that represent this motif of corruption, since by depicting this, Hamlet explains that the world is accumulating these disordered and chaotic leaders who hand down the throne to heirs that are even less qualified for the position than their predecessors. Towards the end of the passage, Hamlet also displays his motif of corruption by announcing, "Frailty, thy name is woman." By saying this, Hamlet has turned into a bit of a misogynist, in that he clearly believes that his mother is weak for not hanging on to the memory of his deceased father and corrupted for them marrying his uncle directly after.